The things that have made Robot Wars still an enjoyable watch even to this day includes the fights, sometimes, the presenters, sometimes, and the teams, most of the time. But to me, one of the strongest assets the show had was its ever-changing soundtrack, and how the soundtrack came around and how it contributed to such a strong and evocative aesthetic has its roots all the way back to the original Robot Wars events in San Francisco. In this video, I will briefly talk about the origins of and the many changes to the music and artists that shaped the style of all eras of Robot Wars. This is a brief history of the Robot Wars soundtrack. During the inception of Robot Wars, creator and special effects designer Mark Thorpe would find funding for the original events and form a legal partnership with a New York-based record label called Smile Communications, a subsidiary of Profile Records run by Gary Pinney and David Bergman, or DB for short. Between the three of them, the idea of having a live soundtrack during the event came about, and Smile Communications, specialising in electronica and techno music, took full advantage of this. The group they would choose to spearhead this idea would come from a completely different continent altogether. In the early 1990s, the German underground music culture, fresh off the coattails of the fall of the Berlin Wall not even 5 years before, and with bands like Can, Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream and Amon Düül being used as the jumping point, had been revitalised. The birthplace of Detroit techno gave rise to Berlin techno, and nightclubs all over Germany would house many raves, slowly curating a legacy that would still be spoken about decades later by pretentious music historians like myself, of course. In that scene, Cem Oral and Ingmar Koch, known individually as Jammin' Unit and Dr. Walker, are making a name for themselves as a part of a group called Liquide, where they were discovered by one Carlos Slinger, a musician and then part owner of the New York fashion store Liquid Sky. We were somewhat already known in the European underground techno/electronic music scene with Liquide when Carlos Soulslinger from Liquid Sky NYC discovered us and invited us to New York. We instantly became friends. It felt like we had known each other for years. Liquide and Liquid Sky share the same sense of humour when it comes to the truly important things in the world. UFO sightings, alien abductions, extraterrestrial technology, Bigfoot, and the underground club culture. Carlos then introduced us to DB from Smile Communications, and both Gary Pinney and DB ended up signing us. Liquide, not long after being signed by Smile, would be asked by Gary Pinney and DB to perform a live soundtrack for the first Robot Wars event in 1994, and would release it under the same label, Robot Wars Combat Zone. A two-part suite which would be the bar for what would be the sound of the new sport of the 21st century. Liquide would spend the rest of the year composing Robot Wars themed music for their album The Increased Difficulty of Concentration, releasing a 4-part Robot Wars symphony as the first disc's climax. Those tracks were a catch-up of the exact concept of science fiction. Space, robotics, world. Actually, we both have a big love for science fiction, and there was always a futuristic influence in our music. If something started to sound like a band or organic, we dropped it quickly. Liquide once again performed for Robot Wars in their second event in 1995 in collaboration with Jammin' Unit's brother, Can Oral, better known as Khan. For later events, Smile Communications would continue to use pre-existing music from other artists, most of whom were under said label or would use other Liquide tracks that were made outside of the context of Robot Wars. The best known example being the song Der Laufer, which was used in the Robot Wars 1995 pilot during the fight between the Master and Thor. At the start of 1996, Smile Communications released Robot Wars 2, Metal on Metal, a series of tracks produced by Dr. Walker, Khan, German techno DJ Monica Cruz, and Thomas Thorne, who had collaborated with Dr. Walker on previous projects together. Smile Communications would continue to promote Robot Wars through their music and their artists heavily until Robot Wars creator Mark Thorpe and Profile Records founder Steve Plotnicki came to blows in a long-winding legal battle that virtually ended the use of Smile artists for Robot Wars events. The final US event in 1997 put Mark Thorpe in a position where he could use music outside of the Smile universe. Sadly, we only have one ID on a track used in a fight between Ziggy and Razorback, but it's a tune that comes from the soundtrack of the PlayStation 1 game Wipeout 2097. Photex, the third sequence, released in 1996, would be reused for the 1997 event. So, with the end of the US events, comes the end of this chapter. While the majority of the music used during this early period of the sport of robot combat may continue to remain mostly unheard of and mostly ignored within the sport, it encapsulates an era of electronic music and an era of creation and experimentation that would have long-lasting effects not only within the aesthetic of robot combat in the years preceding it, but also within the realms of electronic dance music, underground club culture, the material conditions of the artists who composed the music, and the rise of new technologies that would take over nearly every part of our waking lives over the next 3 decades. During this time period of musical experimentation, UK TV directors Tom Gutteridge and Stephen Carsey and their production company Mentorn had caught wind of the Robot Wars competitions happening in San Francisco, and using Smile Communications music as their reference, commissioned music composers John Waddell and Will Parnell to create a soundtrack for a brand new television series to be aired on BBC Two. And what they would create would define an entire era of combat robots in the UK. If you want to listen to more of Air Liquide's Robot Wars inspired music, their entire catalogue is available in their Bandcamp in the link below. I'd like to give my formal thanks to Chairman Ingmar for helping me out with this project. Their approachability was really helpful, and I am eternally grateful for both of them. And I'm also eternally grateful for them for making such absolute bangers. Genuinely, I've really enjoyed making this project and I've really enjoyed listening to their music. So thank you, Chairman Ingmar, for being so helpful with the project. If you want to listen to their music, please support them on Bandcamp. Let them know how much you appreciate them, and yeah, support music, man. Music's great. Music's a fantastic art form.